income levels in the U.S. and the level of poverty and the disparity of wealth. And the Lane Center really was noticing all that, and so decided that we would take a closer look at some of these issues, and particularly the connection between Catholic social thought and unemployment and labor. You can find out more information about what we're working on. You go to our website. We just initiated 2 recommendations for advocacy. One is called the Circle of Protection, which is an ecumenical program. A number of Christian organizations are working on this, and the Circle of Protection is an attempt to protect those most vulnerable people from all the chaos, the economic chaos that's happening right now, and the budgets cuts that are proposed. So that's the first one is called the Circle of Protection. The second one is called Faith Advocates for Jobs, which, again, there's more information on our webpage about that. And the Jesuits in the United States are really involved in this as well. It's a group of faith organizations advocating for more jobs and creating more jobs and trying to get like churches and synagogues and congregations, giving them tools on how to help people in their particular communities to work through this crisis that the country is going through and people are going through. And particularly your age group, recent college grads, as our speaker will mention, have the highest unemployment rate in the country right now. So it's pretty crippling for your particular group. So as we got more involved in our own discussions, we thought we really need to connect with someone who's an expert on this and really involved like on the ground with what's going on in terms of labor and whatnot. So we're really happy that Eileen Purcell agreed to come and meet with us and explore some of these issues on a deeper level. Eileen comes with a wealth of experience organizing for social and economic justice. She has a bachelor's degree from Stanford University and an MSW from San Jose State. She began her organizing career at the Archdiocese of San Francisco, with 3 social service programs there, and she really led the organizing drive in defense of political refugees from both Central and South American countries. So she got some great experience there. She was one of the architects of the sanctuary movement, which was a huge movement in San Francisco. And she also has been the executive director of the SHARE Foundation, which is organizing international economic, political, and moral support for refugees and displaced families from Central America. For the last 12 years or so, she's been working as a labor organizing Catholic hospitals, employees at Catholic hospitals, and most recently with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW Local 1245, is that correct? Which Local 1245 represents some 18,000 workers from Bakersfield, California, to that area. So this whole region. So she's got some fantastic experience and expertise on labor organizing, and we're really delighted that she's here to talk about some of this with us today. So please join me in welcoming Eileen Purcell. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and I am thrilled to be here. I sound very old in my resume. I want to tell you a little bit about my background, my family, which is really what credentialed me to be a great organizer, the youngest of 9. And then I want to talk about Catholic social thought as it springs from the Judeo-Christian tradition, a story about a great labor organizer. And then I want to talk about the difference a union can make. Notwithstanding all the negative press about unions, I want to just put on the table some of the difference unions have made in our lives that we don't even remember or know about. The crisis today and why it should matter to you all. You are the future. Why should it matter to you? Does that sound fair? If at any time you have a question, you get to interrupt. Let me ask one question before I start. Anybody here ever been in a union or have parents or grandparents, uncles, aunts who've been in a union? Anybody who's had parents, grandparents, relatives, friends in management? I've been a manager, and I've also been on labor. That's helpful. Thank you. So a little bit more about me. As Mike said, I've been organizing for my entire life. I was born and raised in San Francisco. My father was an Irish-American, very proud of his Irish roots. He had lots of thoughts about the English. A Jesuit from England is wonderful. My mother was Lebanese. She grew up on the border with Mexico. Her first language was Arabic, her second language was Spanish, and her third language was English. And you got stopped around in school if you didn't speak English. So she got in trouble rarely, but and they loved family, they loved their faith, and they loved their country. And I was blessed because they bequeathed to me what I consider to be the treasure of my faith tradition. I have to be disclosive and tell you that I distinguish between tradition and institution. And so I am by definition a Christian and from the Catholic tradition, which I claim wholeheartedly. Some members of our institution might view me as somewhat heretical, and we can talk about that later if you want to. My 8 brothers and sisters, 2 of them were Catholic priests, one of whom was a Catholic worker and still is, the other who works until very recently at Santa Clara University as their development director. They have both since been married and have adult children. And I have 6 sisters. 3 are teachers, one's a psychologist, one's a nurse practitioner, and one's a lawyer. Being the youngest, and I have a twin sister, I had to learn to organize strategic alliances. That was true at the dinner table, it was true at the playground, it was true every time we gathered. And my mother was brilliant. Our family life was built around the liturgical year. It was a festival. From Christmas to Easter, from Lent to Advent, it was a celebration, and our faith tradition streamed through all of our choices, and at the heart of it was social justice. So let's talk about Catholic social teaching. Oh, I forgot one major chapter. Mike mentioned the war and my work with refugees. The greatest gift of the war in El Salvador to me, besides being a witness to the resilience and power of a people who's oppressed and whose lived gospel experience was contemporary, was my husband. Jose is my partner, my life partner. We've been together for 28 years. We had 3 children together during the war. He fled the military that was sponsored and armed by the United States. When they came to his home, his crime was he was a student at the Catholic University. And he worked with the parish priests to visit farm workers who were organizing their union. That was a crime in El Salvador. And he and his 5 co-students at the Catholic University were targeted. 60 military operatives went to their homes. They found his 4 compatriots. They were slaughtered and left in the plaza. He was making a protest. We met here in San Francisco when I was doing my work with the Archdiocese. We fell in love. We had 3 beautiful boys, and 2 of them are related to USF. One graduated from USF Law School last year and is now a practicing attorney after looking for work for a year. And we're so happy for him. He is thrilled to be working 16-hour days, 7 days a week. Freedom. And able to pay some of his loans back. And my other son, Tilo, is in your sports management program, where he is first year and flourishing and very happy. That was him on the phone right before I started asking, where's the restaurant in Chinatown, since 2 outside people are visiting. And my 3rd son, Alejandro, is in Chile right now doing environmental work, fighting international mining, which is poisoning water sources. We're very proud of our boys. But that was the great gift of the war in El Salvador, if you will. So let's come to a great labor organizer in the biblical tradition, if you will, and his name is Moses. We know of Moses as the man who led the people, the slaves, out of bondage, out of Egypt. And it was a move from slavery to the promised land. And I describe him as having an organizer has an impossible task. It is not conceivable that you're going to break out of the social, economic, and cultural structures that define slavery as a given. The Israelites are slaves and they owe their allegiance to Pharaoh. How is it possible that you can even imagine changing that set of relationships, turning it upside down? Well, he had a friend and ally named God. And God made a promise, a contract, a covenant. Help my people be free and take them to the promised land. So what was Moses' vision? It was getting to that land of milk and honey, where there would be religious freedom, a place to make your labor and live your life with your tribe. What was his method? It was the Passover meal. We gather at a table. We gather at a table, we break bread together, and I understand that the law at that time was you couldn't just slaughter a lamb and then not eat it all. And some families weren't big enough to eat the whole lamb, so you had to invite your neighbors. Ingenious. Because Moses worried that the people would be crushed, because power was so forceful. They were small, Pharaoh was big. They came together over a meal. They broke the bread. They made the plan, and they began the journey to the promised land. Now, it was very important to have a strategic ally named God, because you can't do it if you're by yourself. No group can. Not a small group of farm workers, not a small group of Salvadoran campesinos, not a group of nurses at Catholic Healthcare West, not a group of geothermal technicians, maintenance, and operators where I'm organizing right now today in Cobb Mountain in the geysers. They cannot succeed by themselves because the powerful forces are too great. So we need allies. So Moses had a great ally. He had God. And God took sides. God takes sides. God's with the 99%. Does that mean he hates, or she hates the 1%? Absolutely not. But it means that there is an allegiance to the poor, the oppressed, the disenfranchised, the people on the margins. Jesus, the other great organizer in my life, did not start in the seat of power in Rome. He did not start in Jerusalem. He started on the margins. He had a conversation with the woman at the well at a time when you don't talk to women in public, in terms of that anthropological setting. He met with tax collectors who were reviled. Jesus gathered lepers and fisher people. He was with the people on the margins. He told the story of the Great Samaritan. Now Samaritans, I didn't know until I was much older, were not really in the fold. The Samaritan was the foreigner. The Samaritan was not part of the tribe. And yet Jesus made the Samaritan the hero of his story. So Jesus, an organizer, a vision, the beloved community. The method, love one another. Communion, there's union in that word. Come together, bridge the divides. And because we're human, we will blow it sometimes. So the second part of what it meant to be Christian was not only love each other, it was forgive each other. Reunion. So Moses is a great labor organizer. Jesus gathered the people and gave his life for the promise of unconditional love and forgiveness. Fast forward, those are our roots. Fast forward to modern Catholic social thought and our experience when it comes to unions. Since the turn of the last century, the late 1800s to this century, there has been a plethora of very rich Catholic social documents, encyclicals and pastoral letters, starting with Leo XIII, who took into account the times in which they were living, where you had this rapid industrialization in Europe that was catching up in the United States. So rapid industrialization, a shift from the agricultural economy to the industrial economy, to urban life, not rural life. People are dislocated from the agricultural culture. And people are being exploited. Mass production, right? And you've seen the films, the old films, black and white films. So it was in that context that the Catholic Church that had a growing number of members who were victims of rampant corporate greed, if you will, although not the modern corporation as we know it, begin to take a position coming back to the tenets of our Christian tradition, which is love one another, the beloved community. We are all interwoven. And what you get is a very rich lineage. So you have a social contract that says you cannot have justice if you treat your workers without fair wages, fair benefits, fair working conditions. You cannot lock textile workers in the mill so that they'll get burned down if the cotton catches on fire. You cannot deprive later on a farm worker of a long-handled hoe so they have back-breaking injuries. That is unjust. That is against natural law. That is against the vision of the beloved community. In 1986, and I'm whipping very quickly, well, I handed out the Catholic Scholars for Worker Justice have issued, they were founded about 2 years ago, 300 theologians and scholars from across the United States and some outside the country have distilled Catholic social teaching, and these are the central tenets that they've put on paper around the indispensability of unions and the right to associate, the right to bargain for your self-interest at a table where you have some power and some countervailing force against corporate interests which are driven by a profit motive. Right? So you can take a look at that. The other very important feature is solidarity, that we are not isolated entities. Every one of us is related to the person next to us. We are our brother and our sister's keepers. We are a community. And I think it would be taking another step. We are related to our environment, to all creation. All creation is precious. In 1986, the Catholic Bishops' Conference issued a pastoral letter called Economic Justice for All. And the central premise of that document, which was very radical, was a critique of capitalism and communism. And the central tenet was the economy should be in function of people. People are not in function of the economy. That just turns everything upside down. When you think about it, when I go to work, does my boss really think that I'm God's gift to this earth? Probably not. Maybe, ideally, but so often people go to work to make that living, get home, and then the life begins, right? You go to work and you want to finish up, get that income, and be able to get home, turn the game on, eat, friends over. The economy is in function of the person. People are not cogs in the machine. Huge. Huge. Monsignor Higgins was 86 when he died. George was at the Catholic Conference for Bishops for 60 years. He was out of Chicago. He came from a working class family. And his whole life was dedicated to standing with workers wherever they were, whether it was in the north, the south, the mill, factory, the field. And he became an expert. And he summed up Catholic social teaching on work and unions this way. Work is not only to make a living. Work is a creative exercise by which we become full human beings, and through which we make our offering to each other and to the world. It's sacramental. Our work is an outward sign of ourselves as people with a divine spark. And unions are the vehicle through which workers are protected and are participants. Unions are the legally sanctioned, protected means to have a voice at work, to offer my opinion, and to sometimes get some binding results because of my opinion. When you don't have a union, you don't have economic citizenship. When you don't have a union, you have a suggestion box. You can make a suggestion, but your boss can say, nice suggestion, and disregard it. When you don't have a union, you can have a grievance, but you're an at-will employee. Your boss can say, with all due respect, you have 2 weeks notice. I don't need a cause to terminate you. I can change your schedule. I can redefine your job description. When you don't have a binding voice at work with legal protections, even when you have an enlightened CEO, you don't have any rights. Monsignor Higgins called that economic citizenship. And he called it freedom. Think Moses, the journey to the promised land. How are we free? Economic citizenship. Unions, therefore, are a very important vehicle in a healthy democracy. That was his corollary. So Catholic social teaching, all life is precious. Work is not only to earn a living, it is to become our fullest selves, and we are social by definition and are in community at home and at work, and we have a right to form associations and to have legal protection to advance our interests, whether they are wages and benefits or working conditions or whether it's because we have great ideas to advance the mission of the company. So what's the difference a union makes today? You've all seen the bumper sticker perhaps? The weekend, brought to you by union men and women, folks that brought you the weekend. The litany goes, safety standards, minimum wage, although union workers, according to the Labor Department, make 28% more than their equivalent who is not union, so 28% higher wages, and 52% more likely to have a health care plan at work. The 8-hour day, the 40-hour work week, paid vacation, paid sick leave, maternity leave, all negotiated and fought for by organized labor. Now, when I say organized labor, I suspect that many people think, okay, that outside entity that comes flying into the work site and goes to have cut a deal in the back room with the boss. At its best, that's not how labor works. Has that ever happened? Yes. Not unlike the church, we have a very wide spectrum of organizational expressions. And so the union at its best, in my experience, is when rank and file members participate at every level of the union. And so at its best, you have bargaining committees comprised of rank and file people with people who have experience, who go to the table, across from them sits management, and you negotiate ideas and terms of employment. You have a say. Do you win everything? No. Do you win something? Yes. Is it better than not having a voice? Almost always. At IBEW, where I work, I was hired 2 years ago because 3,000 clerical workers at PG&E, the local power utility, their contract is expiring. They've been organized for almost 60 years, and they've had some of the best standards in the country. We represent 13,000 people at PG&E. It's our biggest membership group. But for 60 years, we'd always bargained the clerical contract in conjunction with what they call the physical contract. The guys who climb the poles and fix the wires, put the towers up, go into the substation, risk their lives. I mean, it's unbelievable, and I can share a little bit about that in a minute. But the clerks, who are first-line responders, who answer the phone when there's a gas leak, who take care of power outages, who walk older people through their bills, they're 3,000 women mostly. 74% are women, 59% people of color. And so when their contract was coming up, even though they had a great contract, it was the first time they were going to negotiate without the predominantly male side of the house. And there hadn't been a lot of education for several years. So there wasn't a lot of participation. So the unit, as we call it, this unit of 3,000 workers, was vulnerable, was weak, and management knew it. And so I was asked to come in to help organize and educate and animate, my word, animate this group of people about what was at stake. Management made my job very easy because their opening proposal, first day of bargaining with 9 of our members and 4 staff people, including myself, opening proposal was, we're going to introduce a 2-tier wage system and we're going to outsource entire parts of the department. What that meant in translation, women who were making $30,000 to $70,000 as clerks, that anybody hired next year was going to start making half or 30% below what the person next to them was making. Identical work, identical training, half the pay. We went into the field and we began to talk about what's a 2-tier wage system do to the community. It shreds it. It creates division. You don't feel very good about yourself if you know you're doing the same work and maybe even working harder and the person next to you is making twice as much as you are. It is divisive. It results in higher turnover. And ultimately, it results in 1 tier, as we're witnessing with United Auto Workers, who agreed to a 2-tier to get out of the crisis 3 years ago. And now management at GM is saying, we really only want 1 tier, and guess what? It's not the higher tier. It's the lower tier. So we educated and we animated, and we started with 9 members of the bargaining committee. We identified 130 leaders at every plant in PG&E, from Bakersfield to Eureka. And we did a petition. And we got 2,300 people to sign the petition, and then picture this wall. When management walked in, we had a blow-up of the petition with everyone's live signature cut and pasted on it. So we brought 23 voices in with us to the bargaining room. We also turned to our faith leaders and said, we need your help. We got 9 faith leaders to write a letter to the CEO at the time, Peter Darby, saying this is unconscionable. We got 5 prestigious women from San Francisco to write a private letter saying this is unconscionable. We thought we had this fight already, equal work for equal pay. Women are going to be disproportionately affected. We got 75 faith leaders prepared and poised to take out a full-page ad in various newspapers. The CEO called and said, I don't want this fight. We will find an alternative to teach your wages. What a difference does a union make for those 3,000 workers and everyone who comes behind them. Everyone who comes behind them. Your generation, there's a standard that was held. Is it permanent? No. Is it at risk, depending on the climate? Yes. And it was organizing and permanent organizing that safeguarded it. That's the difference a union can make. I want to point out that PG&E is a $13 billion corporation that nets $1.2 billion a year in profit, and the CEO makes $9 million a year. So when you're talking about this, it wasn't even for cost savings. They said to us, this is not about cost, because clerical only accounts for 2% of our overall cost. This is about, and this was their word, the market. What will the market tolerate? The market allows us to bring down costs, to lower women's wages, because we're in an economic recession, depression, depending on where you live. They thought they could do it because of the environment, and if we hadn't been organized, if there hadn't been a union to fight back, the union being the workers, we would have lost. What a difference a union can make. Okay, so unions today, at our height, which was between 1950 and 1975, 1 in 3 Americans were unionized. 1 in 3, 33.3%. Extraordinary. Today, 1 out of 8 overall workers are organized. 8%. It's dramatic fall. And one might ask why the decline. I should say in the private sector it's even worse. It's 6%. In the public sector, where you've seen all the assaults lately, 36% of public employees are unionized. And thus you've seen this kind of very targeted assault on public worker unions. You would think, one would think that the crisis in the United States is because those firefighters, those police officers, those teachers are scamming the system and just milking it of all the millions and millions of dollars. You would have forgotten that there were decisions around banking, around financial regulation or not, deregulation, and excessive, very irresponsible corporate behavior that led to the final financial collapse of 2008. You would think, based on the propaganda, that it's teachers or nurses. It's not. So we have declined. Why the decline? There are some structural causes for the decline. If you look at it, technology, the entrance of technology, computerization, displaced millions of workers across the country. It's no less revolutionary than the mechanization of agriculture. The computer alone has replaced people. In the legal profession, they don't need as many lawyers, in part because you can now program a computer to write your writ, to write your affidavit. It's an amazing thing. You don't need as many people to read your scans, your medical scans, because it can be done electronically. Huge changes of technology. Globalization. Globalization, trade policies. The exodus, the plant closures of the 70s, went to where they could get the cheapest labor possible. And in the words of Milton Friedman, China's stupid, think China. 1 billion people. And so there was this influx of corporate interests to poorer countries across the globe where they could exploit the resources and the most precious resource, human beings, at the cheapest wage possible. The maquiladoras on the US-Mexican border is a clear-cut example of that. So technology, globalization, a corporate fight back. The Wagner Act, labor law was codified in 1935, giving workers the right to organize. It actually encourages collective bargaining as a healthy thing. In 1947, the Taft-Hartley Act was passed, which began to unravel, legally begin to fight back some of those gains by workers. And that has been a steady assault. When Margaret Thatcher was doing her work in England, Ronald Reagan in 1980 set the tone for what would become the next 30 years of anti-union animus in the United States. The PACTA strike, 1980. Traffic controllers were told, if you strike, you will be fired. They were all fired. And that union was crushed, and the anti-union, anti-government became the rant that's been ever since prevalent. But there's another reason. Notwithstanding, internally, every institution has its flaws. Unions need to be introspective and continually reform. But the other fact that's not widely known is that there is a multi-billion-dollar union avoidance industry in the United States now. Every corporation that is not organized hires union lawyers to come in and teach them how to block unionization. I should stop here. I understand some of you have to go to something else. Feel free. My feelings are not hurt. Leave when you have to. And so you have this multi-billion-dollar anti-union crusade that's been working, and it's in conjunction with a corporate media. There's a joke that's going around the internet that some of you may have seen. You have a corporate CEO. What do you get? You have a corporate CEO, a worker, and a labor organizer in the same room, and a plate of 12 cookies. And the CEO takes 11 cookies and then turns to the worker and says, "Look out for that labor organizer. They're going to steal your cookie." It's happening right now in Calpine, where we're organizing 235 workers, where 5 labor investors have come in and are holding daily meetings every single day, threatening people, even though they're not supposed to. If the union comes in, you will lose your bonus, you will lose your overtime, you will maybe not gain anything, they can't promise you anything, and we're watching who supports and who doesn't. Threats that are illegal. But the NLRB process, the National Labor Relations Board process, is so cumbersome that it will take years to bring those challenges, those unfair labor practices, to a resolution. But we're fighting. So you have had this terrible anti-union crusade, and we're fighting back. So what's it got to do with you? What's it got to do with you? Well, it's your future. It's your promised land. What's it going to look like? And when we examine the trends today are that there are living standards are declining. More people think that they will have a lower standard of living than their parents today, for the first time in the last 100 years in the United States. There are fewer job opportunities, and we'll talk about that in a second. Education is getting tougher and tougher to come by. It's true that if you have a BA, you have your stats go up, better chance. You'll be part of the 2% elite in the world with the BA. So congratulations to all of you who are here and studying. But when you graduate, you'll probably be in debt. I don't want to ask the question how many people here have student loans, but student loans passed a milestone last month, $1 trillion of student loan debt. It has now exceeded the credit card debt, and people believe it may be the next bubble. What does that mean? So you graduate with student debt. Okay, not a problem. I'm going to get a job. But as Mike referenced, jobs in this recession, in the recovery, have been hard to come by. And the new jobs are tending to be half of what they used to be paying, and they tend to be part-time. So in terms of expectations, I can pay my student loan back once I get a great job. It's taking longer to get a full-time job, and certainly longer to get a benefited job. So student debt in an employment situation that is very precarious matters to you. The unemployment rate for young people as defined between 16 and 24 is 18%. That's 4.1 million people in our country. What happens when you don't have employment? You don't have income. When you don't have income, you can't pay your mortgage or your rent. Several million more houses are on the queue to be foreclosed in this country. That decimates neighborhoods. The statistic that Mike was referring to, a fresh set of statistics that just came out, says that 21% of children in the U.S. are now poor, living under the poverty threshold. And those stats change dramatically depending on what ethnic group you're part of, by the way. So if you're black, it's 46% of black children are living under poverty. I think it's 33%, 40%, 40% for Latinos. I think it's 20% if you're Asian. It's a scandal in the richest country in the world. Because there is another myth that we are broke. We are not broke. We have millions, trillions to go to war. But we don't seem to have trillions to reinforce and shore up our people, our education, all the structures and social services that would create a healthy society. Because when one injury to one is an injury to all, if we are a mystical body, if my arm is suffering, I don't even feel that pain, right? If we are one. Now I could go on and on. There's two things I want to share and then stop. What's to be done? Well, before that, I just want to also say another thing. There are some people that say, "I'll just work harder." There are no more hours in the day to work harder. Families, both parents are working to make it. I don't know about, maybe you have more time to work harder. I don't know. I look at my son, they don't have a second. There's no discretionary time. And the fact is that workers are working harder, more hours than ever, are more productive than ever. Profits are higher than they've ever been in our history, and yet there's this dearth of money. Where is it going? And it's going to the top 1%. That's where the 99 and 1% come from and take the Occupy Wall Street movement. So what's to be done? We fight back. We have to organize. Always with the vision of what it is we're fighting for. So for me, my vision is that land of milk and honey. It's the beloved community. It is a dose of power at the table where we break bread together, informed by love and justice. It's possible. It may take a while. It may take 40 years in the desert. But there are victories as we go forward. And we have to keep fighting. Last story. Met with a Stanford professor from the business school last month. I was asking his help because he knows he's the president of the board of directors of a power company in Nevada, where they unilaterally capped retirees' health care benefits. Now, retirees who come out of the power industry, the people who climb those poles, at 55 they retire because they are now bullet. They need knee replacement from all that climbing. Or if they're the wire guys, they have to have their thumbs. They have to have surgery on their thumbs because they've been splicing wires and it's been repetitive motion. They need shoulder replacement. They can't do the physical work after 55, so they retire 10 years before they get Medicare. They cut a deal with the corporation several cycles ago of bargaining. We've been in a relationship for 65 years with NV Energy. The deal was, we'll take fewer wages if you promise us health care security when you retire. Deal done. Our word given. In the 90s, they asked, can we reopen it? It's getting a little expensive, 100% coverage. We talked to the retirees, who we legally didn't have the right to represent anymore. They said, we'll go to the table. We went to the table, and we agreed to an 80-20% cut. In 2009, NV Energy came back and said, unilaterally, we're capping it. Whatever raises happen from now on, you eat. So if you're between 55 and 65, and that happens, how do you afford that? Anthem Blue Shield tried to raise rates by 39% last year, and only because the public outcry didn't. Rates go up about 13 to 15% a year in the United States, healthcare rates. So we're fighting back. So we asked this guy at Stanford Business School, would you call your friend, the chair of the board, and say there's got to be a way to solve this problem? This is only, according to one actuary, $3 million a year, and you make over $1 billion net profit every year. It's got to be doable. And he said, Eileen, we have no power. This is a business professor at Stanford. I said, what do you mean we have no power? He said, that war's lost. The corporations won, workers lost. And the chair of the board has no power, it's really the CEO. I said, excuse me? I said, what do you tell your kids? I don't have kids. So I recovered, I said, what do you tell your students? And he said, I teach how to get power and keep it in corporate America. And so I said, well, that just doesn't do. I have 3 children. What would you tell my 3 children? What do they do? And I said, well, one's a lawyer. He said, that's good. I said, one's in sports management. That's even better. And then I said, and one's an environmentalist. He said, oh. I said, but he's doing metal extraction. He says, well, that's a good industry to be expert in, because maybe it's like he's trying to, he said, I live in a bubble, I teach in a bubble, and I'm staying in the bubble because the war's lost. So I pulled out a picture of Rita Weisha, who's a retiree, bright red dyed hair. She's part of the Hot Sticks. She dances in Nevada. She won the Model Catholic Family Award. She and her husband last year. I said, this is what gets me up every day. Rita, she's hopeful. She's not giving up. She is fighting for these retirees, and she's still able to work, but a lot of her brethren are not. And I said, so you need to figure out your own power and call this man chair of the board. I said, the least he'll ignore it. At the most, because you're Stanford, he might listen to you. By the end of the exercise, he wrote the letter. I can tell you the end of the chapter in a month, but there's movement. Let me stop. Thoughts, questions, challenge me. Go ahead, please.
So as you're saying, as students when we go out to the workforce, we're supposed to, I guess, advocate for organizing, to be part of a union and things like that. But I feel like the struggle right now, especially with the movement, the occupation. So what can you give us as students to try to spread the word, or I don't know, what advice do you have?
I would, by being here today, I would keep getting educated about the issues. And I would not rely on mainstream media for my facts. I would encourage you to explore the people who are organizing, whether it's Occupy San Francisco, Occupy Oakland. I would encourage you to meet your janitor at USF. Ask him his or her name. They're in a union. I think you have 18 unions here. I don't know what they're all like, whether they're healthy or unhealthy unions. I would start right where you are and challenge the notion that people are the problem. I mean, part of it's just starting to tell ourselves the truth. It's that's the first step we can take. Keep the debate going and an honest exchange of ideas. So what is the truth? What's our vision for the better world we want to live in? And what action can I take right now? So educate yourself. I mean, if you have a bank account, all of us have bank accounts. Where do I bank? I just put my money in the San Francisco Credit Union. So they sent me this nice little thing. Where do we bank? Right? Where do we shop? I don't shop at Walmart. They don't treat their workers well. My sister-in-law works at Walmart. And her husband works at Walmart in Utah. And every time they get close to qualifying for medical benefits, they reduce their hours. So they're not qualified for medical benefits. So I would start right where we are. And then we can't do it alone. You can't do it. I would get, who can I talk to? One of the great challenges of my work today is I'm talking to people who don't necessarily agree with me. Up in the Geysers. It's a very conservative part of California. And they were very suspicious of the San Franciscan. They were sure I was a vegetarian. And I wish I should be a vegetarian. I'm not. I aspire to be a vegetarian. And they were sure I was radical, and I said, I am, but I'm conservative when it comes to family values. I'm monogamous. I'm 28 years married. I respect you even if we disagree. That was shocking. And I am seeing these very conservative people experience the betrayal. Because the social contract that used to govern in our country for them is that window where if you did if you worked hard, you were able to live a middle-class existence. Your kids could go to college, you could pay off your mortgage, and you could retire with some dignity. That's gone. And they had been working their tails off thinking that was part of the promise, and now they're seeing it's being taken away. So find like kindred spirits, but don't shy away from talking to people who don't agree with you. Find ways to find the divine in each, and what are we holding in common? I don't know if that's helpful. But I would start right where you are and what you're doing. Get educated, get involved where you can, And we can't all do it all. So be strategic where you invest your time and your resources. But we all beg, we all go out to eat periodically. I always say small is beautiful and local is global. I like to support local farmers. I wish the prices were lower. One thought. Thank you. Other questions? One question that comes to me often is, we get why you want a union when you have a really exploitative employer, but why would you have a union when you have an enlightened management, when you have really good people, friends, people who would never hurt anybody? And my response to that is, well, there's two reasons. One is, when the going gets tough, the reflex is going to be to balance the budget by cutting jobs. And it's not just a job, it's a livelihood. It's a family system that's impacted. The other reason is, I say, is workers are a resource. They should not be on the liability column. They should be on your assets column, because frontline workers know the work better than anybody else. Here's an example. In a hospital we were organizing, management made a decision to carpet the hallways. They thought it would make it, nicer, more hotel-like for families and patients. They didn't ask the maintenance crews. Can you imagine pushing the gurneys on a rug? Very hard. What if someone gets sick on the rug? What if there's an accident on the rug? Very difficult to maintain the standards of sanitation. It was not malicious, it just wasn't thought through. It was a janitor who could answer that question very quickly. Bad idea for this reason. Or needle sticks. Or back injuries. One of the things we've done at Catholic Healthcare West, which had a big, huge fight to get unionized, the biggest Catholic hospital west of the Rockies, was we began to collaborate. And out of the collaboration, we have reduced, when I was working at SEIU, a different union, we reduced needle sticks, we reduced back injuries, and we figured out management patient worker committees that could really regularly review the issues that were coming in and how would we resolve them. In the Catholic tradition, it's called subsidiarity. Solve the problem at the ground level where the problem is. Don't go far, far away to try to solve the problem. Get right close to the people who are living the problem. Let them have a say in how the problem is solved. The other example of that would be in Reading, where a CEO of a hospital that was unionized, and he'd been bitterly opposed, and deeply Catholic, and just felt affronted that we would say that Catholic social teaching says, they were unionized and he stayed, and crunch time came and he had to do layoffs. So he called the union. We're going to do layoffs. And we said, could we meet before you do the layoffs? So we went and we met, and one of my colleagues said, there's another way. And they designed a way through attrition, incentivizing early retirement, adjusting schedules so that not a single person was laid off, which meant everyone got to keep a job. They may have gone from 5 days to 4 days a week, but they got to keep their family health insurance. There was a whole package. Other thoughts, questions? Yeah.
I was going to say, like in the past, there's been like self-organized grassroots movements without unions who have let's say stopped a corporation or a waste facility being built in their town or in their backyard. Do you think that these self-organized grassroots movements can last a long time before needing a union, or do you think that like the experiment just had a union from the beginning?
I think we need both. I think we need a variety of forms of organization. And sometimes unions get very large and very cumbersome and very top-down, and I'm not interested in that model of union. And that, so I think the nation's indigenous organic development of local groups is wonderful. I think at some point they will be confronted with the question, can we sustain ourselves if we don't institutionalize? And what does institutionalize mean? And we have a body of labor laws that protect certain actions, because that's how it's evolved, that you don't necessarily have if you become a nonprofit that's not unionized. So there are pluses and minuses, and that local community, I think, would have to assess what's the best form for this community at this time. Robert Reich, the former labor secretary under Clinton, was asked by Sister Catherine Gray, the chair of the board of St. Joseph Health System, can't you have a just system, a just employer without unions? And Robert Reich answered, you can have a just wage and compensation package, but you can't have a just workplace, because unless speech is protected, unless I can say to you what I really think, knowing you can't fire me because I'm going to be outrageous, because I'm protected by the union, you don't have the benefit. Workers can't be free to speak.